Joining me now, pianist Lara Downs, composer Eve Beglarian. Lara, have you and Eve worked together before, or was this kind of a blind date, the two of you coming together for this project?
E- Eve and I are old friends, old friends, and I was so happy that this worked out and that we were matched together for this marathon.
Mm-hmm.
So
How did the
happy to
two of you first?
reconnect
Yeah.
in our
How
big
did you
troubles.
first connect?
I think it was the River Project. I think the first time we worked together was in 2010, in the early days of my coming back from paddling and biking down the Mississippi River and writing music in response. And Lara guested in on one of the first shows we did of the River Project.
Hmm.
Wow, I haven't thought of this in a while. That was a long time ago.
Well, now, Eve, a lot of your music, there's an animating idea or principle behind a lot of it. A river, a short story, a far off country. Do you need that to spur the writing process? Or, I mean, do you write just kind of music as well?
Hardly ever. I'm not sure I would know how, honestly. Um, and this piece is definitely in line with that. It was inspired partially because I'm living in New England during the pandemic, and I'm also in solitude. And I thought, probably a really good role model for how to live in this time is another person who lived in relative solitude in a New England town, which would be Emily Dickinson.
Mm.
And so I started, and Emily Dickinson is somebody I've always meant to spend time with and never really done a deep dive. And so I thought, this is the right time, you know? And so I put together actually a reading group. We call ourselves Queer Emily Role Model. And we've been hanging out with Emily, and it's been completely kind of awesome. And
Wow.
I found this little fragment, not even a poem, that was written on a concert program. And because it's really unlikely she actually went to this concert, but maybe she did. We don't really know, you know. And it's two sentences which may or may not be related one to the other. The first is, of our deepest delights, there is a solemn shyness. And the other is, the appetite for silence is seldom an acquired taste.
Hmm. Well, yeah, that's you could make a lot of you can make a lot with that, you know. There's a certain ambiguity. And so Lara, what has Eve given you in terms are those words sort of incorporated into the score at all?
Only as a program note. Yes. Yeah.
The
It's more
idea
that
of
the
the words. And Eve and I spent about an hour on the phone early in the morning on January 6th planning this piece. Do you
Wow.
remember? And we were deep in this moment of reflection about solitude and the beauty to be found there and silence and the spaces in the silence, and then the world blew up. So I feel like this piece, it's kind of, I don't know, for me, it's a little bit of a relic of the moment before that as well.
Were the two of you, I mean, did you know what was happening? Did one or the other of you have the TV or the radio on?
it was before it was like 10 in the morning that we talked, quite early in the morning for Lara, actually, like, you know. Um, and yeah, it was only maybe an hour later that it all started unfolding,
Hmm.
and it was, yeah. And it definitely colors. There's a video for the piece, and the video is uh, something I made out on my land, which is more rural than the small town that I'm in, um, at dusk in a snowstorm on inauguration day.
Wow.
So, in a way, it's so beautifully said, Lara. the piece sort of frames that period from the insurrection to the actual evening of inauguration day, which I think for me, I didn't actually breathe freely until the evening, until the inauguration actually happened, you know.
Well, and you wouldn't have heard it there in rural Vermont, but there was a big round. I mean, I could hear people applauding here in Brooklyn at the moment where the inauguration was complete, the oath had been taken, and you could just hear it rising up through the neighborhood. I don't know what it was like out in Sacramento, Lara.
We were just happy in our house.
Yeah.
Happy in our house, tears. Yeah.
Well, now, so the work, it sounds like, was certainly not meant to have a political cast to it. And yet it's just one of the, I guess, one of the byproducts of art is that it can acquire that sort of thing. And I mean, Lara, your whole last record was all about that intersection of culture and sociopolitics. And so this is an area you're pretty at home in, I think.
Well, I wonder these days if we're just so highly attuned to those resonances, or if it's always been that way. I mean, of course, work that we make on any given day captures that day. And right now, our days are just full of so much.
Any particular challenges to you as a performer in Eve's score?
Eve, Eve got some panic texts from me the other day because she wrote these beautifully, beautifully elaborate polyrhythms, and I think I said I can't do this, and then she then she reconfigured things slightly, and I could. But it's actually been an interesting insight into the way that your brain maps things and the way that my brain maps things, because you've created a short score for me to show where all of the different rhythms intersect and interconnect. And for me, it was like reading a roadmap, which I'm very bad at. But then I dug in and I learned and I did it, and I'm about to send you some stuff today.
Yeah, I can't wait. The other way the piece works is that it's written as a continuous piece, which if you played it continuously, it would be about 4 minutes long. But then the idea is that it's up to you as the performer to decide where to stop and listen. And the image I have is sort of the way an animal stops to listen as they're grazing, right? And that still silence. And that's completely up to Lara to do as she feels it. And then the ambience of the film is the soundtrack, if you will. Yeah, so there's those spaces which are completely up to Lara to decide.
How long is the film?
The film will be made in response to Lara's performance.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
All right.
that's how it has to work,
I
right?
see.
Because we can't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is,
There's
go ahead, Lara.
this thing about listening. It's interesting. I think that that's been a theme this year in terms of letting the music listen again to the world around. And Eve had suggested, this piece can also be performed using an ambient soundtrack from wherever a performer might be. And that brought back for me these memories of this summer when I was, just adjusting to what it even meant to make music at home for the world, but, here. And I left my house for the first time in July and went to one of the Black Lives Matter marches here at the Capitol. And I came home and I made a mixtape. I just turned on this old tape recorder and made a mixtape. And I had the windows open and there were all these sounds of that day there were dogs and car doors closing and birds and trees. it's something that I hadn't experienced before. When I play this piece, I'm really connecting also with just the immediacy and the connection with surroundings that we've had this year in such a different way.